her Apple Watch.
They never even seized it, did they? They left it in the drawer, right?
Apparently.
It's the piece of evidence in the Lindsay Clancy case that no one can stop talking about.
I don't mean to embarrass you, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
You know why nobody bothered to search that drawer?
And it's the inconsistencies on the Apple Watch that add fuel to the fire.
All right, and after 5:38, it's pretty much blackout. There's no further information or recording, right?
Yes, not until the phone was seized by police, I believe.
If I tell you, sir, that January 25th...
Her Apple Watch was sitting in a bedside drawer, not in an evidence locker, not photographed at the scene, not log tagged, or even opened by the investigators who spent hours combing through the rest of that house. It was found weeks later, not by police, but by the defense attorney and the victim's own father, digging through a nightstand nobody had thought to search. That's the piece of evidence at the center of the Lindsay Clancy trial that has true crime watchers across the country refreshing their feeds every single night. 36-year-old Lindsay Clancy is standing trial for the murder of her 3 children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month Callan, on January 24th, 2023, inside the family's Duxbury, Massachusetts home. She used exercise bands to strangle all 3 kids in the basement while her husband Patrick was out running errands. She has never denied doing it. Her defense isn't built on innocence. It's built on responsibility. Her attorneys argue she was in the grip of postpartum psychosis, pushed there by a cocktail of psychiatric medications and a mental health system that failed to catch the warning signs. The prosecution says otherwise, that this was calculated, deliberate, premeditated. Somewhere between those two arguments sits a smartwatch, and it might be the most contested 4 inches of aluminum and glass in the entire trial.
And she's going to help me break down what all of this means. But first, we have to start with the basics. The fact that 36-year-old Lindsay Clancy now stands trial for the murder of her 3 children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan Clancy. From the start, Lindsay has maintained she killed the children. On January 24th, 2023, she used exercise bands to strangle the kids in the basement of her Duxbury, Massachusetts home. At the time, her then-husband Patrick Clancy was out running errands. This isn't a normal case in the way of whodunit. We know who did it. Lindsay's plea admits that she did, but her plea also says she isn't criminally responsible. Lindsay's defense argues she wasn't mentally sound at the time she killed the kids. She was in the midst of a mental break stemming from possible over-medication, failure of the medical system, and ultimately postpartum psychosis. Now, the Commonwealth disagrees, saying Lindsay acted deliberately with premeditation, methodically murdering the kids. Soon, it's going to be up to a jury to decide her fate. Did Lindsay Clancy have a mental break? Or is she a cold-blooded
Here's
murderer?
where it gets uncomfortable. Patrick Clancy testified that after his children were killed...
Piece of evidence that they will look at is Lindsay's Apple Watch. We learned about this watch from the very first prosecution witness, Patrick Clancy himself. Patrick testified he handed over some of Lindsay's medication to investigators after his children were killed, but that wasn't the only evidence he discovered.
He personally handed investigators a stash of empty prescription bottles he found in a bedside drawer.
Those are in this drawer, and they were all empty, right?
Right.
You observed that, right? There's something else that was in the drawer. Do you recognize that?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's her Apple Watch.
Her Apple Watch. This is the Apple Watch that apparently the police used to go up the stairs, downstairs, heart rate, things of that nature, right?
Trazodone, lamotrigine, mirtazapine, all prescribed to Lindsay in the weeks before the killings, and sitting right next to those bottles, her Apple Watch. The same watch police would later use to build a timeline of her final movements before, during, and after the murders. The same watch prosecutors would put an expert witness on the stand for hours to analyze, and police left it in the drawer. Nobody seized it during the search warrant.
Apparently.
On recross, Patrick gave a bit more insight into the watch.
Now, in reference to the Apple Watch, sir, how many Apple Watches did she have? If you
Just
know?
one.
Just one. It's the only one she had. Police never seized it, right?
Correct.
And the drugs that were in the drawer, the empty drugs and the pill bottles from January, December, 22, 23, the police never seized them, did they?
Nobody bagged it as evidence. It surfaced only after the defense and Patrick Clancy pulled it out themselves and turned it over, well after the initial investigation had already wrapped. When defense attorney Kevin Readington pressed the responding officer on why that drawer was never searched, the answer wasn't reassuring.
In the bedroom, there was a nightstand and there was a drawer. And inside the drawer were a bunch of pill bottles, an Apple Watch, sleeping aids, things of that nature.
I didn't search that drawer, sir.
Okay, I don't mean to embarrass you, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
You know why nobody bothered to search that drawer?
I don't know that it wasn't searched. I just know that I didn't search it, sir. So it may have been searched, and maybe whoever searched it didn't feel that that information was pertinent to seize. I can't
The
speak
officer
for them.
admitted flatly that he never searched it and couldn't say whether anyone else had. That's not an answer. That's a shrug in a courtroom under oath in a triple homicide case. Let's be clear about what evidence chain of custody actually means, because it matters here. It's the documented, unbroken trail proving that evidence collected at a scene is the same evidence presented in court, untampered, unaltered. When that chain has a gap, when a critical piece of digital evidence just sits in a drawer for weeks before anyone thinks to grab it, every data point that watch produced becomes fair game for cross-examination. And the data itself doesn't make things any cleaner. At 5:23 p.m. on the day of the killings, Lindsay's Apple Watch recorded her last heart rate 57 beats per minute.
Calm, resting.
Slightly different.
Now that we understand how everything works, let's take a closer look at Lindsay's data from the day the children died. That was January 24th, 2023.
And what was the last time a heart rate was reported from the watch to the defendant's phone?
So the last heart rate recorded was at 17:23:52, so 23 minutes past 5 in the afternoon, with a heart rate of 57 beats per minute.
What was the average heart rate for the day for the defendant's phone?
There was a range of heart rates going between as low as I believe around 50 and as high as around 122. On average, it was around high 80s, early 90s.
And so at 5:23 p.m., the last recording of her heart rate was 57?
Correct.
And there aren't any further heart rates reported to the phone after that point, correct?
That's correct.
There are a few things to note here. First,
Nowhere close to the elevated heart rate you'd expect from someone in the act of physically restraining and strangling 3 children.
this could just be a coincidence, but the next thing to note is Lindsay's last tracked heart rate was 57 beats per minute. And that's a relatively normal resting heart rate. Usually 57 BPM would mean the person is calm or relaxing. But some wonder, is that too low of a heart rate to be actively strangling her kids? With physical exertion or adrenaline going, someone's heart rate could be 100 or over. Now, conspiracy theories here go wild once again, saying maybe Lindsay didn't really kill the kids. But there's another more logical explanation.
And what are some of the reasons why a watch would no longer be reporting a heart rate to the phone?
If the watch was taken off, if the watch was turned off,
If the battery died?
the battery was dead, yes.
So it's possible Lindsay took off the Apple Watch on purpose, knowing that it would record her heart rate. The prosecution would
After that timestamp, nothing. No more heart rate data ever from the watch, but her iPhone kept recording movement for another 15 minutes, logging 2 separate flights of stairs climbed between 5:33 and 5:38 p.m.
Does that show the last flight climb recorded on either the defendant's phone or watch?
It does. It shows that there was additional flight climb events logged by the phone, which were not logged by the watch, at 17:03 and 17:33.
So these records indicate that at 5:03 p.m., the defendant's iPhone was with the person as it went up the stairs, and then at 5:33 p.m., the iPhone was with the person as it went up the 2 flights of stairs.
Correct.
And there's a time difference there. The start time is 5:33 p.m. and the end time is 5:38 p.m. For 2 flights of
Sandwiched around a missed call from Patrick and an outgoing call back to
Smaller
him.
time period.
Here's the bottom line. Lindsay's Apple Watch stopped recording movement at 5:23 p.m., but the phone stopped recording movement at 5:38.
And what we have here at 5:33 p.m., we have the flight climb started, is that correct?
Correct.
And flight climb ended at 5:38, so
Yes.
that line again connecting them?
Correct. So 2 flight climbs occurred during that time period.
And in between when the flight climb started and the flight climb ended, you have the 2 calls, the incoming call that was missed from Patrick and then the outgoing call to Patrick, correct?
Correct.
Then at 5:38 p.m., both devices go dark. Completely dark. No steps, no distance, no flights climbed, nothing until the following morning.
All right, and after 5:38, it's pretty much blackout. There's no further information or recording, right?
Yes, not until the phone was seized by police, I believe.
By the
but
police.
There's other activity, but appeared to be after the incident.
So the further activity would have been the following morning on the 25th of January, say around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning?
I ended my analysis on the 24th.
Okay. Well, so 5:23 p.m., the watch stops recording information. 5:38 p.m., both the watch and the phone stopped recording any information until the police picked up the phone apparently the following day, right?
And that's when things get genuinely strange, because at 7 a.m. on January 25th, the iPhone starts logging movement data
The
again.
next day.
So if you jump ahead to January 25, 2023, let's say, is that 7 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
Okay. And that says, what is it measuring at 7 o'clock in the morning on January 25?
So this is for the hour of health data. So it's been aggregated and it shows that between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. There was 47 meters traveled.
Okay. And then it goes on and it talks about, again, 7 o'clock in some seconds, it talks about 134 distance traveled.
Yes.
Okay. And, for example, January 25 at 8 o'clock in the morning, it talks about distance traveled, steps counted, and distance would be 47 meters or feet.
Distance traveled, except by 7 a.m. on January 25th, Lindsay Clancy was not walking anywhere. She was in a hospital bed in a medically induced coma, tubes running into her body, after jumping headfirst out of a second-story window in an attempted suicide the night before. So how does a phone log new movement data from a woman who is medically not moving?
If I tell you, sir, that January 25 at 8 o'clock in the morning, Lindsay Clancy was in a coma, laying in a bed with tubes coming out of her body and certainly not wearing her Apple Watch. How did that happen?
Based purely on the report there, I'd suggest the data came from the phone rather than the watch.
I just told you about the watch. Did you ever look at this watch?
No, we can't actually pull data directly from the watch. We pull it from the phone.
How do you look at a watch?
We extract the data from the phone, which is synchronized to the from the watch to the phone.
Okay, so I'm handing you, is that an Apple Watch?
It appears to be, yes.
Okay. And if I suggest to you that this was found a number of days later in Lindsay's bedroom in a drawer that the police never seized, have you ever seen this?
The prosecution's own forensic expert had an answer, and it wasn't a conspiracy. It was Bluetooth. The watch and phone sync automatically if the watch is powered off or removed. The phone keeps independently tracking steps and stair climbs on its own, based purely on whoever happens to be carrying it. Once investigators finally took custody of the phone, it would have logged movement simply from being carried between an evidence room and a storage room. Under cross-examination, the expert conceded he couldn't say for certain whether the January 25th data came from the watch or the phone, because the defense's printout didn't specify and he hadn't been asked to check.
Distance traveled.
Yeah, whenever the device is turned on, or whenever the phone is turned on, it will consistently record steps walked regardless of who's carrying it. It will consistently record flights climbed regardless of who's carrying it.
And so if the watch is turned off in a drawer somewhere, the phone would be what's relaying, or not relaying, but the phone would be what's recording the distance traveled and the steps taken, not the watch, correct?
That's the presumption, yeah. If the watch is turned off, it's not doing anything, any data would be from the phone.
That
Wow,
gap
there's a-
between what the evidence technically shows and what it can actually prove is exactly the space true crime forums have flooded with theories. Some corners of the internet have gone as far as suggesting Patrick Clancy had something to do with his children's deaths and that investigators quietly buried the watch to protect him. Let's shut that down clearly.
Online say that was on purpose. And I have to stress, these are conspiracy theories. They're not substantiated at all or even discussed in court. But some online believe that Patrick Clancy really killed his kids. They say he was never properly investigated by Massachusetts investigators, some alleging he even had an in with them and that investigators left the Apple Watch behind on purpose. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Patrick Clancy is not a suspect in this case. He's not been charged. He has been cleared by police. And in fact, Lindsay admits that she killed the kids.
Patrick Clancy has never been charged, has been cleared by police, and Lindsay Clancy has consistently, personally admitted to killing her children from day one. There is no evidence inside or outside that courtroom, suggesting otherwise. What there is evidence of real documented, admitted on the stand evidence is a law enforcement team that failed to secure a critical piece of digital forensics for weeks in a case that would eventually hinge on minute-by-minute timestamps. That's not a fringe theory. That's chain of custody, and it's the kind of institutional sloppiness defense attorneys dream about because it doesn't require proving anyone else did it. It only requires proving that what the state says happened can't be fully trusted at the margins. Attorney Heather Hansen, who's followed this trial closely from inside Massachusetts, put it simply, people trust technology more than they trust people. And when a data point looks clean and official, jurors are inclined to treat it as gospel.
You know, I think, Sierra, people have a tendency to believe technology over people and to think that the technology is the be-all, end-all evidence in the case. And so when you've got something that looks so formal and looks so correct, I think people tend to put a lot of weight on that, and the Apple Watch has told us quite a bit about what Lindsay was doing in those final hours.
And I have to ask, because this is very fair, the way that we rely on technology and DNA, people put a lot of stock in it, which is great too. But obviously...
But Apple Watches are newer, more error-prone, and more easily disrupted than we assume. A dead battery, a watch slipped off a wrist, a loose Bluetooth connection, any of that produces the exact blackout window jurors are now being asked to interpret as either innocent explanation or damning premeditation.
Don't make anything of it. Listen, I think that we have seen, and have seen in this case, situations where the Apple Watch has not been correct. These pieces of technology do make mistakes, and I think that Apple Watches especially, to be honest, Sarah, if it had been flipped and the phone had stopped and the Apple Watch had kept going, that would have been more shocking to me, because I think the phone has been around longer, it's more established technology. The Apple Watches are relatively new and they're attached to the body, which means that they don't have the same sort of necessary path to follow as the cell phone does.
And that's ultimately the needle this jury has to thread. Not whether Lindsay Clancy killed her children. She's already told them she did. Not whether Patrick Clancy is somehow responsible. The evidence doesn't support that, and entertaining it only distracts from what's actually at stake. The real question is whether the Commonwealth can prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Lindsay Clancy was criminally responsible for her actions at the moment she committed them, or whether a jury believes she was in the grip of a psychiatric break severe enough to strip away that responsibility entirely. What we do know is this: somewhere in a bedside drawer, next to a stack of empty pill bottles, sat a piece of evidence that could have clarified, or complicated, nearly every theory in this case, and it took the defense team to go find it. Whatever verdict comes down in this trial, that failure doesn't disappear. It sits there, permanently, as a reminder that convictions aren't just built on what happened, they're built on what investigators actually bothered to collect. Keep following this one, because when the jury finally goes behind those doors, they're not just deciding Lindsay Clancy's fate, they're deciding how much weight a watch left in a drawer should carry in a case about 3 children who never got the chance to grow up,